Hello and good evening, classmates. My name is Damien Darby, and this is my second speech, and it is my oral proposal speech, and it will be on the constant changes in the United States Navy. My specific purpose statement is to inform you guys about the constant changes that occur in the United States Navy. Have you ever wondered why the Navy uniforms look the way they do? Or even where do the U.S. Navy ships get their names from? Well, I'm going to discuss the origins of that in my speech tonight. The U.S. Navy is the Naval Warfare Service branch of the United States Armed Forces and one of the 7 uniform services of the United States. The United States Navy is the largest, most capable Navy in the world. This is an organization that I have been a part of for a decade, and I have seen numerous changes from uniform regulations to ships to even tattoo policies. It is constantly growing and evolving to our everyday lives and proceeding into the 21st century. Since its inception on October 13, 1775, the U.S. Navy has been a revolving door of change due to the time period and our evolution as the human race. I am going to discuss to my audience the evolution of naval vessels. Various naval vessels include aircraft carriers, amphibious assault ships, cruisers, littoral combat ships, destroyers, and submarines, which are among the ships that exist in today's United States Navy. The United States Congress authorized the original 6 frigates of the United States Navy with the Naval Act of 1794 on March 27, 1794. The USS Constitution is the world's oldest commissioned naval vessel afloat today, and it is docked in Boston, Massachusetts. The Constitution was launched in 1797, one of 6 original frigates authorized for construction by the Naval Act of 1794 and the 3rd constructed. The frigates were originally designated by the letters A through F until March of 1795, when Secretary of War Timothy Pickering prepared a list of 10 suggested names for the ships. President Washington was responsible for selecting 5 of the names: Constitution, United States, President, and Congress, each of which represented a principle of the United States Constitution. The 6th frigate, Chesapeake, remained nameless until 1799, when Secretary of the Navy designated her a namesake of the Chesapeake Bay, ignoring the previous constitutional naming protocol. This year, the United States Navy will add 9 ships to the battle force as it slowly grows towards a 300-ship fleet. 9 ships are scheduled to be commissioned into the fleet this year. The total includes 1 aircraft carrier, 2 destroyers, 2 nuclear attack submarines, and 4 littoral combat ships, known as LCSs. Just like the ships are a tradition in the U.S. Navy, so are the uniforms. The uniforms of the U.S. Navy have evolved gradually since the first uniform regulations for officers were issued in 1802 on the formation of the Naval Department. The predominant colors of the U.S. Navy uniforms are navy blue and white. U.S. Navy uniforms were based on Royal Navy uniforms of the time and have tended to follow that template. The inception of the U.S. Navy uniforms were the beginning of a global impact on the world. The prestige and respect that came with the uniform is still shown to this very day. The U.S. Navy's first uniform was created on 1817. The War Department officially declared that the enlisted sailors wore blue jackets and trousers, red vests with yellow buttons, and a black hat. At that time, funding was short and uniform regulations were not heavily enforced. Certain aspects of the uniform evolved over time and signified ranks such as yeoman, culinary specialist, master at arms, and to distinguished officers. The size and complexity in the 1800s, like the rank of chief petty officer, was established to help organize and manage day-to-day operations. Those who achieved this rank tended to have spent more time serving in the military and welcomed the addition of service stripes to reflect their length of service. While the original uniforms used string to hold the pants at the waist, buttons soon replaced them. In 1864, a flap in the front of the trousers was implemented that required 7 buttons to hold them up. In 1894, the flap was lengthened and 6 more buttons were added. Eventually, the string reappeared at the back of the waist to help sailors whose pants needed an extra clench when the buttons failed. This is for the guys that were extra, had an extra thickness to them in the back. However, the bell bottoms were another iconic aspect of classic Navy uniforms. They were implemented in the 1800s to distinguish sailors from civilian fashion. Bell bottoms were extremely useful. They were easily rolled above the knee to keep legs dry and allowed sailors to quickly remove them while still wearing their shoes in case they were tossed overboard. Neckerchiefs were common at the time among men working on ships since they were convenient sweat rags. They were useful enough that the Navy codified a standard issue neckerchief with a square knot in 1817. It was common to use a coin to keep the neckerchief's shape while rolling it. The early 1900s saw 2 major changes to Navy uniforms: denim for jumpers and trousers, and uniforms for newly enlisted women. Female uniforms tended to reflect civilian fashion rather than maritime traditions, and it wasn't until World War II that the Navy updated this trend. Among a few traditional aspects of the uniform to change in the 1940s was the removal of the hatband ribbon in 1941. These ribbons used to feature a sailor's unit name on the flat of the hat, but these distinctions were eventually shifted to the shoulder for security reasons. Many changes to the uniform took place in 1973. Many sailors in leadership roles, including many senior petty officers, wanted their uniforms to appear more distinguished. In today's Navy, traditional uniforms were replaced with suits and ties that were more in line with chief petty officers and officer regulations. The idea was to present the modern-day Navy as a unified force, but these changes weren't taken well and were largely reversed by 1980. At that point, women received that were more practical, functional, and indicative of American naval traditions. Current naval uniforms maintain a number of traditions stemming from its formation, including jumpers and neckerchiefs. That is the end of my speech. I hope you enjoyed my speech. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great night.